And it shall come to pass, when all these things are come upon thee, the blessing and the curse which I have set before thee, and thou shalt call them to mind among all the nations where the Yahweh thy Elohim hath driven thee, and shalt return unto Yahweh thy Elohim, and shalt obey his voice according to all that I command thee this day, thou and thy children, with all thy heart and with all thy soul, that then Yahweh thy Elohim will turn thy captivity and have compassion upon thee, and will return and gather thee from all the nations where the Yahweh thy Elohim have scattered thee. If any of thine be driven out unto the outmost parts of heaven, from thence will Yahweh thy Elohim gather thee, and from thence will he fetch thee. And Yahweh thy Elohim will bring thee into the land which thy fathers possessed, and thou shalt possess it. And he will do thee good and multiply thee above thy fathers. And Yahweh thy Elohim will circumcise thy heart and the heart of thy seed, to love Yahweh thy Elohim with all thy heart and with all thy soul, that thou mayest live. And Yahweh thy Elohim will put all these curses upon thine enemies and on them that hate thee, which persecuted thee. And thou shalt return and obey the voice of Yahweh, and do all his commandments which I command thee this day. And Yahweh thy Elohim will make thee plenteous in every work of thy hand, in the fruit of thy body, and in the fruit of thy cattle, and in the fruit of thy land, for good. For Yahweh will again rejoice over thee for good, as he rejoiced over thy fathers, if thou shalt hearken unto the voice of Yahweh thy Elohim, to keep his commandments and his statutes, which are written in this book of the law. And if thou turn unto Yahweh thy Elohim with all thy heart and with all thy soul. Praise the Most High. That was Deuteronomy chapter 30, verses 1 through 10. Now we look at Isaiah chapter 58. Isaiah 58, verses 12, 13, and 14. Isaiah 58, verses 12, 13, and 14. And they that shall be of thee shall build the old waste places. Thou shalt raise up the foundations of many generations, and thou shalt be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of paths to dwell in. If thou turn away thy foot from the Sabbath, from doing thy pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, the holy of Yahweh honorable, and shall honor him, not doing thine own ways, nor finding thine own pleasure, nor speaking thine own words, then shalt thou delight thyself in Yahweh. And I will cause thee to ride upon the high places of the earth, and feed thee with the heritage of Yaakov thy father, for the mouth of Yahweh hath spoken. That was Isaiah 58, verses 12, 13, and 14. And now we turn to the book of Acts. Acts chapter 13. Acts chapter 13, verses 38 to 44. Acts chapter 13, verses 38 to 44. Be it known unto you, therefore, men and brethren, that through this man is preached unto you the forgiveness of sins. And by him all that believe are justified from all things from which ye could not be justified by the law of Moses. Beware, therefore, lest that come upon you which is spoken of in the prophets. Behold, ye despisers, and wonder and perish. For I work a work in your days, a work which ye shall in no wise believe, though a man declare it unto you. And when the Yahudim were gone out of the synagogue, the Gentiles besought that these words might be preached to them the next Sabbath. Now, when the congregation was broken up, many of the Yahudim and religious proselytes followed Paul and Barnabas, who, speaking to them, persuaded them to continue in the grace of Yahweh. And the next Sabbath day came almost the whole city together to hear the word of Yahweh. That was Acts chapter 13, verses 38 to 44. Now we turn to the epistle that was addressed to the Hebrews. Hebrews chapter 8, verses 6 through 12. Hebrews chapter 8, verses 6 through 12. But now hath he obtained a more excellent ministry, by how much also he is the mediator of a better covenant, which was established upon better promises. For if that first covenant had been faultless, then should no place have been sought for the second. For finding fault with them, he saith, Behold, the days come, saith Yahweh, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt, because they continued not in my covenant, and I regarded them not, saith Yahweh. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith Yahweh. I will put my laws into their mind and write them in their hearts, and I will be to them a Elohim, and they shall be to me a people. And they shall not teach every man his neighbor and every man his brother, saying, Know Yahweh, for all shall know me, from the least to the greatest. For I will be merciful to their unrighteousness, and their sins and their iniquities will I remember no more. That was Hebrews chapter 8, verses 6 through 12. Now we turn to the revelation of the Messiah, revelation of the Messiah Yahushua, Revelation chapter 14, Revelation 14, verses 6, 7, and 12. Revelation 14, verses 6, 7, and 12. And I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach unto them that dwell on the earth, and to every nation and kindred and tongue and people, saying with a loud voice, Fear Yahweh, and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come, and worship him that made heaven and earth and the sea and the fountains of waters. Verse 12. Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of Yahweh and the faith of Yahushua. That was Revelation chapter 14, verse 6, 7, and 12. Now we go to the seventh trumpet, Revelation chapter 11, seventh trumpet, Revelation chapter 11, from verses 15 to 19. Revelation chapter 11, verses 15 to 19. And the seventh angel sounded, and there were great voices in heaven saying, The kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of our Elohim and of his Messiah. He shall reign forever and ever. And the 24 elders, which sat before Yahweh on their seats, fell upon their faces and worshipped Yahweh, saying, We give thee thanks, O Yahweh Al Shaddai, which art and wast and art to come. For thou hast taken to thee thy great power and hast reigned. And the nations were angry, and thy wrath is come. And the time of the dead, that they should be judged, and that thou shouldest give reward unto thy servants the prophets, and to the saints, and them that fear thy name, small and great, and shouldest destroy them which destroy the earth. And the temple of Yahweh was opened in heaven, and there was seen in his temple the ark of his testament. And there were lightnings and voices and thunderings, and an earthquake and great hail. That was the seventh trumpet of the seven trumpets of Revelation. Revelation chapter 11, verses 15 to 19. Now we turn to the last reading of the morning, Isaiah chapter 66. Isaiah 66. Isaiah 66, 22 to 24. As the new heavens and the new earth which I will make shall remain before me, said Yahweh, so shall your seed and your name remain. And it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, saith Yahweh. And they shall go forth and look upon the carcasses of the men that have transgressed against me. For their worm shall not die, neither shall their fire be quenched, and they shall be an abhorring unto all flesh. Thus ends the morning reading. Thank you, Sister Isha Sakat, for posting those scriptures. Now, we were studying last night Daniel chapter 9. And we stopped at the point that Daniel showed us, or should I say Gabriel showed Daniel, when the beginning of the 2,300-day period would begin, which also includes the beginning of the 490-year period specifically outlined for the nation of Israel. Yes, it is on YouTube. So anyway, I can't do that now. But anyway, so Daniel chapter 9 told us when the beginning should be. So let's take a look at Daniel chapter 9. Daniel chapter 9. Daniel 9. Let us look at verse 20, 21. Actually, no, hold on. Let's look at verse 24 and 25. Daniel chapter 9, verse 24 and 25. Daniel 9, verse 24 and 25. 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city to finish the transgression, to make an end of sin, and to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, and to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall, even in troublous times. So, when they start to build the wall and the streets, that's when this begins. When the decree goes forth that they can build the wall and the streets, that is when this begins. Now, there was a decree that went forth in the beginning to build the temple. That's the first thing that they built, the temple. And so today, I'm going to go into great detail into this process here because for many reasons, several reasons. Number one is because it is a tedious process, and I want to go step by step so that we have a clear understanding of what's happening here. Number two, the dates that we'll be coming up with are very important. And so we want to make sure we have the dates properly, because we know that at the end of the 2,300-year period, the cleansing of the heavenly sanctuary begins. Okay, so we have to have this date proper, so we know where we are in history. Okay, and then three, I want to also, we're going to need this as we go into Revelation, because as we stated when we started Revelation chapter 1, we saw the Messiah in the midst of 7 golden candlesticks, indicating he's in the holy place of the heavenly sanctuary. The heavenly sanctuary is the sanctuary in heaven that the Most High pitched and not man. There was an earthly one that we know that the Most High instructed Moses to build, but he also told Moses in both Exodus chapter 28 as well as Hebrews chapter 8 and chapter 7, he told Moses that he was to make the earthly tabernacle after a pattern that was shown to him. The pattern that was shown to him is a pattern of the heavenly that is not made with human hands. So there's a heavenly tabernacle upon which the earthly one was assigned. So now we know that there's going to be a cleansing of the heavenly tabernacle with Messiah himself as the high priest to cleanse the sanctuary in heaven from all of our confessed sins. We know that those confessed sins are going to be placed on the head of the scapegoat, who is Satan. So here we have to have an understanding of that. And this is going to help us. This is going to help us if we do this. So that's why these reasons, and maybe a few others, are why we're going to take our time and go through what date did the commandment go for to restore and to build Jerusalem. Okay, so let us start in Second Chronicles chapter 36. Let's go back to Second Chronicles chapter 36. In Second Chronicles 36, it is that chapter that is describing the final straw, as it were, where Nebuchadnezzar came and destroyed the temple. And it also describes, it actually goes from that point, and it quickly goes over 70 years, and it goes to the point where Cyrus the Persian king, gave a decree that everybody that is in his kingdom that are the Hebrews that want to go back and start to rebuild the temple, that they should go. So let's take a look at this. Let's start at, let's see. I'm going to start at verse 1. I'm going to read verse 1. I'm going to go piece by piece down 2 Chronicles 36. It's the last chapter, the last division of 2 Chronicles. So I'm going to start off and read from verse 1 down to verse 8. Then the people of the land took Jehoahaz, the son of Josiah, and made him king in his father's stead in Jerusalem. And Jehoahaz was 23 years old when he began to reign. And he reigned 3 months in Jerusalem. And the king of Egypt put him down at Jerusalem and condemned the land in 100 talents of silver and a talent of gold. And the king of Egypt made Eliakim, his brother, king over Judah and Jerusalem, and turned his name to Jehoiakim. Necho took Jehoiahaz, his brother, and carried him to Egypt. Jehoiakim was 25 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem. And he did that which was evil in the sight of Yahweh, his Elohim. Against him came up Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and bound him in fetters to carry him to Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar also carried the vessels of the house of Yahweh to Babylon, and put them in his temple at Babylon. Now the rest of the acts of Jehoiakim and his abominations which he did, and that which was found in him, behold, they are written in the book of the kings of Israel and Judah. And Jehoiakim, his son, reigned in his stead. So we can see a pattern. This pattern is actually long. If you go through 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st, 2nd Chronicles, you can see it's a pattern of many kings that did wickedly in the sight of the Most High. There's a handful that did righteously, a handful. But once they would die, the land would go right, the next leader would lead the nation right back into idolatry and paganism. The leaders would do that. That is why when we looked at Daniel 9, he said 70 weeks are cut off or determined or separated for that people to make an end of sins, to bring in everlasting righteousness and anoint the most holy. So the restoration of the temple services was going to be a sign that sin was going to be removed. And they were demanding, the Most High was demanding and telling Daniel that the leaders of the kingdom, when I give you guys back into the land and you're able to restore your building, I need you to be on point. I need you to be on point with me. I need you to be completely earnest in your desire to serve righteousness and not serve other gods. That's what he basically was saying. So here we can see that the pattern before the destruction, the first destruction of the temple, was such. Let's continue. 2nd Chronicles chapter 36. I'm going to read from verse 9 down to verse 16. Watch this. Jehoiakim was 8 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 3 months and 10 days in Jerusalem. And he did that which was evil in the sight of Yahweh. And when the year was expired, King Nebuchadnezzar sent and brought him to Babylon with goodly vessels of the house of Yahweh, and made Zedekiah, his brother, king over Judah and Jerusalem. Zedekiah was 21 years old when he began to reign, and reigned 11 years in Jerusalem. And he did that which was evil in the sight of Yahweh, his Elohim, and humbled not himself before Jeremiah, the prophet, speaking from the mouth of Yahweh. And he also rebelled against King Nebuchadnezzar, who made him swear by Elohim, but he stiffened his neck and hardened his heart from turning unto Yahweh, Most High of Israel. Moreover, all the people, all the chief priests and the people transgressed very much after all the abominations of the heathen, and polluted the house of Yahweh, which he had hallowed in Jerusalem. And the Most High Yahweh of their fathers sent to them by messengers, rising up early and sending, because he had compassion on his people and on his dwelling place. But they mocked the messengers of Elohim, and despised his words, and misused his prophets, until the wrath of Yahweh arose against his people, till there was no remedy. Yes, brothers and sisters, there comes a time when that's it. There's no remedy. That's it. He's going to let the wrath fall. And he did. As we're going to see in a few seconds, he did let the wrath fall on his people. But even there, even when he lets the wrath fall, he has them taken to Babylon. They know who they are. They know who their fathers are. They know their history. They know what their names are. They know their Hebrew names, even though they were going to Babylon. But this was just stage one of the spanking. We are enduring stage two right now. We're at the end right now of stage two, but this was stage one of the spanking. Let's continue. 2 Chronicles chapter 36. 2 Chronicles 36 from verse 16 down to verse 21. But they mocked the messengers of Elohim and despised his words and misused his prophets until the wrath of Yahweh arose against his people till there was no remedy. Therefore, he brought upon them the king of the Chaldees, who slew their young men with the sword in the house of their sanctuary, and had no compassion upon young man or maiden, old man, or him that stooped for age. He gave them all into his hand. And all the vessels of the house of Elohim, great and small, and the treasures of the house of Yahweh, and the treasures of the king and of his princes, all these he brought to Babylon. And they burnt the house of Yahweh, and brake down the wall of Jerusalem, and burnt all the palaces thereof with fire, and destroyed all the goodly vessels thereof. And them that had escaped from the sword carried he away to Babylon, where they were servants to him and his sons unto the reign of the kingdom of Persia, to fulfill the word of Yahweh by the mouth of Jeremiah, until the land had enjoyed her Sabbaths. For as long as she lay desolate, she kept Sabbath, to fulfill 70 years. So 70 years, they were going to be in desolation until the kingdom of Persia. When the kingdom would change from the Medes to the Persians, then there would be another opportunity for them to go back and bring in everlasting righteousness and make an end of sins and stop iniquity. There would be an opportunity. Let's look at the opportunity. 2 Chronicles chapter 36, verse 22 and 23. 2 Chronicles 36, verse 22 and 23. Now, in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of Yahweh spoken by the mouth of Jeremiah might be accomplished, Yahweh stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom, and put it also in writing, saying, Thus saith Cyrus, king of Persia, all the kingdoms of the earth hath Yahweh most high of heaven given me, and hath charged me to build him a house in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Who is there among you of all his people? Yahweh his Elohim be with him? Let him go up. So this decree by Cyrus, the Persian, was to rebuild the temple, right? It wasn't to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. It was to rebuild the temple. Y'all see that? Testing 1, 2, 3. I want to make sure everybody sees that before we move forward. So you can see that it was to rebuild the temple. So now he gave a decree to rebuild the temple. And then there came another king, and they had enemies that stopped them from building the temple. So they had enemies that didn't want them to rebuild the temple. That would be people that were Gentiles or Hamites, like your Hittite people, your Edomites were not Gentiles, but your Edomites, and then your Gentiles like your Hittites and your Jebusites. They did not want them rebuilding this temple. Okay, and so let's take a look at that, and let's go to the next book, Ezra. Ezra chapter 4. I'm going to read Ezra chapter 4 from verse 1 down to verse 5. Now, when the adversaries of Judah and Benjamin, notice it says Judah and Benjamin, because these were the two tribes of the southern kingdom. See, Judah and Benjamin were the two tribes of the southern kingdom. Now, when the adversaries of Judah and Benjamin heard that the children of the captivity builded the temple unto Yahweh Most High of Israel, then they came to Zerubbabel and to the chief of the fathers and said unto them, Let us build with you, For we seek your God as ye do, and we do sacrifice unto him since the days of Esarhaddon, king of Ashur, which brought us up hither. But Zerubbabel and Yahushua and the rest of the chief of the fathers of Israel said unto them, Ye have nothing to do with us to build an house unto our Elohim. But we ourselves together will build unto Yahweh Elohim of Israel, as the king Cyrus, king of Persia, have commanded us. Then the people of the land weakened the hands of the people of Judah and troubled them in the building, and hired counselors against them to frustrate their purpose all the days of Cyrus, king of Persia, until the reign of Darius, king of Persia. So they tried to stop them. They tried to stop their building. And eventually, to make a long story short, what happened after Cyrus passed, can you hear me? Testing 1, 2, 3. Can you all hear me? I want to make sure. Okay. After Cyrus passed, there was another king, Darius of Persia, not Darius the Mede, but Darius of Persia. And so what happened, the adversaries sent letters to the other king and had them stop the building of the temple. They had them stop the building of the temple. So then the people of the land responded and appealed to the king and asked him to look into the records and see that there was a previous decree. And so the king allowed them to continue. That is, Darius, the king of the Persians, allowed them to continue building the temple. Okay. So it was delayed and it went back and forth for a minute, right? But they ended up doing it. Now, the word will show us, and let's take a break for a moment and look back in Daniel chapter 9 for a moment. We're going to come right back to Ezra because we're going to spend a minute in Ezra. But let's go back to Daniel chapter 9 for a moment. Daniel chapter 9. And I'm going to read verse 25 and 26 of Daniel chapter 9. 25 and 26. And focus on the time period that is being spoken of here. Okay, Daniel chapter 9, verse 25 and 26. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 60 and 2 weeks. The street shall be built again and the wall, even in troublous times. Now notice verse 26. And after 60 and 2 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood. Unto the end of the war, desolations are determined. Okay, let's stop here for a moment, of course. 7 weeks, 60 and 2 weeks, we determined yesterday was 69 weeks. Then if you notice in verse 26, it doesn't mention the first 7 weeks again. It's mentioned the 60 and 2 weeks. Why is that? Because the first 7 weeks, or the first 49 years, was the building of the temple and the city. Are you following me? The first 7 weeks that is mentioned in verse 25, the first 49 years, that was the building of the temple and the city. Okay. Once that was completed, the next 62 weeks was the countdown until the Messiah. Okay. And he said after 69 weeks, Messiah was going to be cut off, but not for himself. In other words, he's going to be put to death, but not because he did something wrong. Right. But the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city. Well, we know who that is because the temple was destroyed a second time, never to be rebuilt again until the New Jerusalem comes. So that second time, we're going to deal with that a little later, but that's when Messiah was cut off. So we're going to talk more about that. So first, now we can see, so it was going to be a 49-year period in the building of the temple and the city. If you recall, when Messiah told the scribes and Pharisees that he said, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will rear it up. And they tried to laugh at him. And they said, and let's take a look at that. That's Gospel of John. Gospel of John. Chapter 2. Gospel of John, chapter 2. Gospel of John, chapter 2. We're going to read from verse 16. Actually, I'm going to read from verse, let's see. I'm going to read from verse 12 down to verse 21, from 12 to 21. After this, he went down to Capernaum, he and his mother and his brethren and his disciples, and they continued there not many days. And the Yahudim Passover was at hand, and Yahushua went up to Jerusalem. And he found in the temple those that sold oxen and sheep and doves and the changers of money sitting. And when he had made a scourge of small cords, he drove them all out of the temple, and the sheep and the oxen, and poured out the changers' money, and overthrew the tables, and said unto them that sold doves, take these things hence, make not my Father's house an house of merchandise. And the disciples remembered that it was written, the zeal of thy house hath eaten me up. Then answered the Yahudim and said unto him, what sign showest thou unto us, seeing that thou doest these things? Yahushua answered and said unto them, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. Then said the Yahudim, 46 years was this temple in building, and wilt thou rear it up in 3 days? But he spake of the temple of his body. So you notice they said it took 46 years for them to build the temple. See? And so when you're talking about the temple and the city, that's what the 7 weeks that we're talking about. It's 49 years total. Okay, so they're telling him it took 46 years to build this temple. How are you going to raise it up in 3 days? Of course, he's talking about his body. They couldn't understand that, being that they were carnal and not spiritual. But that's another story. But we can see that the 7 weeks we were talking about from Daniel 7 is covering the building of the temple and the city. Everybody see that? Testing 1, 2, 3. Everybody understand it? Because that's important. Okay, so now let's go back to Ezra. Let's go back to Ezra. So we see that Cyrus, the Persian king, made a decree that the temple should be rebuilt, right? And then there was another decree by Darius. Now, the work after Darius gave them permission to rebuild the temple, the second decree. After Darius gave them permission, there was no more decrees made as far as the temple. Now, let's take a look at that. Let's look at Ezra chapter 6. Ezra chapter 6. Again, this is very tedious, so bear with me as we're going through this. Ezra chapter 6, we're going to read from verse 1 down to verse 7. Okay? Then Darius the king, this is Darius the Persian king, made a decree. And search was made in the house of the rolls, where the treasures were laid up in Babylon. And there was found at Achmetha, in the palace that is in the province of the Medes, a roll. And therein was a record thus written. In the first year of Cyrus king, the same Cyrus the king made a decree concerning the house of Elohim at Jerusalem. Let the house be builded, the place where they offered sacrifices. Let the foundations thereof be strongly laid, and the height thereof 80 cubits, and the breadth thereof 80 cubits. With 3 rolls of great stones and a row of new timber, let the expenses be given out of the king's house. And also let the golden and silver vessels of the house of Elohim, which Nebuchadnezzar took forth out of the temple, which is at Jerusalem, and brought unto Babylon, be restored, and brought again unto the temple, which is at Jerusalem, everyone to his place, and placed them in the house of Elohim. Now, therefore, Tatnai, governor beyond the river, Sheshar-Boznai, and your companions, and the Arsakites, which are beyond the river, be ye far from thence. Let the work of this house of Yahweh alone. Let the governor of the Jews and the elders of the Jews build this house of Yahweh in his place. See that? So now there's a search made, and Darius comes out and says, wait a minute, we found a decree from Cyrus that said they should build this house and that the king would help finance it. So listen, leave him alone, let him build the house. So now they started to build it, they were stopped, and now they're starting again. Okay? Everybody got me so far? Test, everybody's got me? All right, so now you got that part. So let's continue now from verse 8. And let's go from verse 8 down to verse 15. This is going to be a little tricky. I'm letting you know up front, it's going to be a little tricky, but bear with me. Let's read this step by step so you understand exactly what's going on. Okay, so now, moreover, I make a decree. This is Darius now. And Darius, there's two Darius. There's Darius the Mede, which first ruled, but this is Darius the Persian. He came later. So he says, moreover, I make a decree what ye shall do to the elders of these Jews for building of this house of Yahweh, that the king's goods, even of the tribute beyond the river forthwith, expenses be given unto these men, that they be not hindered. And that which they have need of, both young bullocks and rams and lambs for the burnt offerings of Yahweh of heaven, wheat, salt, wine, and oil, according to the appointment of the priests that are at Jerusalem, let it be given them day by day without fail, that they may offer sacrifices of sweet savors unto the Elohim of heaven, and pray for the life of the king and of his sons. Also, I have made a decree that whosoever shall alter this word, let timber be pulled down from his house, and being set up, let him be hanged thereon, and let his house be made a dunghill for this. And the Elohim that hath caused his name to dwell there, destroy all kings and people that shall put their hand to alter and to destroy this house of Elohim, which is at Jerusalem. I, Darius, have made a decree, let it be done with speed. Then Tatnai, governor on this side of the river, and Shethar-Boznai, and their companions, according to that which Darius the king had sent, so they did speedily. And the elders of the Yawadim builded and prospered through the prophesying of Haggai the prophet and Zechariah the son of Iddo. And they built it and finished it according to the commandment of Yahweh of Israel, and according to the commandment of Cyrus and Darius and Artaxerxes of Persia. And this house was finished on the 3rd day of the month of Adar, which was in the 6th year of the reign of Darius the king. So let's stop right here. Verse 15 is extremely important. Verse 15. Notice what it says in verse 15. And this house was finished on the 3rd day of the month of Adar, which is the 6th year of the reign of Darius the king. Did you see that? So you see the house that is the temple was completed while Darius the Persian was still king. Do you see that? Everybody see that? Testing 1, 2, 3. Okay. So you see that the house was completed under Darius. Okay, I said that 3 times. You say, why does he keep repeating that? Look back at verse 14 for a moment. Look back at verse 14. Let's look at verse 14. Now we know that the temple was completed under Darius. Let's look now at verse 14. And the elders of the Yawadim builded, and they prospered through the prophesying of Haggai the prophet and Zechariah the son of Iddo. And look. And they builded and finished it according to the commandment of the Elohim of Israel, according to the commandment of Cyrus and Darius, and wait a minute, Artaxerxes, king of Persia. So the Bible tells us that they actually finished the temple under Darius. What did Artaxerxes have to do with anything? Do you see that? So Cyrus gave the initial command, it was stopped, and later continued again under Darius, and they actually finished the temple under Darius. But they mention a 3rd king. Do you see that? Artaxerxes is mentioned. Why is he mentioned? That's a good question. Why is he mentioned? Because something else must have happened after Darius, because they mentioned Artaxerxes. Well, I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to show you. Artaxerxes is the one that gave the command for them to build walls and them to build the streets. Therefore, it is Artaxerxes who gave the command that started the 2,300 days. Does that make sense, brothers and sisters? Artaxerxes gave the command that started the 490 years and the 490 years and the 2,300 years. He gave that command because now you have the temple built under Cyrus and Darius, and you saw the decree that Darius made, and you saw the decree that Cyrus made. But now, what need we of any further decrees, right? There was no need of another decree, not for the temple, because the temple was going to be built. But we need another decree for them to build the city. Why? Because they can have a temple. That's no problem. They're worshiping because Cyrus and Darius had learned the God of the Hebrews. They had been converts to the God of the Hebrews. So that's no problem. But now you're talking about building the city, which gives you sovereignty. The city being built gives you sovereignty, and we don't know if we want that, right? So let's take a look at this now. In Ezra chapter 7, Ezra chapter 7, Ezra chapter 7, Ezra chapter 7, and we're going to read from I'm going to start at verse 6 and go down to verse 6. From verse 6, let's see. I'm going to read from verse 6 down to verse 13. Okay? This Ezra went up from Babylon, and he was a ready scribe in the law of Moses, which Yahweh, Elohim of Israel, had given. And the king granted him all his requests, according to the hand of Yahweh, his Elohim, upon him. And there went up some of the children of Israel, and of the priests, and of the Levites, and the singers, and the porters, and the Nethinim, unto Jerusalem, in the 7th year of Artaxerxes the king. And he came to Jerusalem in the 5th month, which was in the 7th year of the king. Upon the first day of the first month, upon the first day of the first month, I'm sorry, I lost my place. Yes, upon the first day of the first month began he to go up from Babylon. On the first day of the 5th month came he to Jerusalem, according to the good hand of his Elohim upon him. For Ezra had prepared his heart to seek the law of Yahweh and to do it, and to teach Israel statutes and judgments. Now this is the copy of the letter of the king Artaxerxes that King Artaxerxes gave unto Ezra the priest, the scribe, even the scribe of the words of the commandments of Yahweh and of his statutes to Israel. Artaxerxes, king of kings, unto Ezra the priest, a scribe in the law of the God of heaven, perfect peace, and at such a time. I make a decree that all of the people of Israel and of his priests and Levites in my realm, which are minded of their own free will to go up to Jerusalem, to go with thee. Now wait, notice in verse 10, for Ezra had prepared his heart to seek the law of Yahweh and to do it, and to teach in Israel statutes and judgments. Now, wait a minute. They were under the laws of the Medes and the Persians, and prior to that, the Babylons. So they would be following those laws. But now they're giving permission to follow laws and statutes of the nation of Israel. Are you seeing what that means? So you can see now they're being given some sovereignty to obey the law of their God in their land. Okay? They've been given some sovereignty. Okay. Also, I want you to notice too, and we'll look at later in this chapter. We'll look later in this chapter here. Let's see. Going to start I'm going to start at verse 21 of the same chapter 7 of Ezra, and go from verse 21 down to verse 28. From verse 21 down to verse 28. This is again Artaxerxes making a decree. Even I, Artaxerxes, the king, do make a decree to all the treasurers which are beyond the river, that whatsoever Ezra the priest, the scribe of the law of Yahweh of heaven, shall require of you, be it done speedily. Unto 100 talents of silver, to 100 measures of wheat, to 100 baths of wine, to 100 baths of oil and salt, without prescribing how much. Whatsoever is commanded by the Elohim of heaven, let it be done diligently. Let it be diligently done for the house of the Elohim of heaven. For why should there be wrath against the realm of the king and his sons? Also, I certify you that touching any of the priests and the Levites, singers, porters, Nethinim, ministers of this house of Yahweh, it shall not be lawful to impose toll, tribute, or custom upon them. And thou, Ezra, after the wisdom of thy Elohim that is in thy hand, set magistrates and judges. See, now he's setting up a city, which may judge all the people that are beyond the river, all such as know the laws of thy God, and teach ye them that know them not. And whosoever shall not do the law of thy God and the law of the king, let judgment be executed speedily upon him, whether it be unto death or banishment or confiscation of goods or imprisonment. Blessed be Yahweh, Elohim of our fathers, which hath put such a thing in this king as this in the king's heart, to beautify the house of Yahweh which is in Jerusalem. Hath extended mercy unto me before the king and his counselors, and before all the king's mighty princes, and I was strengthened as the hand of Elohim of Yahweh, my Ali, was upon me, and I gathered together out of Israel chief men to go up with me. So they went up, and now they're going to live now in Jerusalem, and they're going to rebuild the wall. And this is by the decree of Artaxerxes. Now, what you need to do at this point is you need to Google what year did Artaxerxes, the king of Persia, give the decree to rebuild Jerusalem, right? Somebody do that. Somebody do that while we're here. Look it up. What year did Artaxerxes give a decree to rebuild Jerusalem? What year? Because that's the beginning of this thing. That's the beginning of the 2,300 days. What year did he give that decree? Because you can see the decree here in Ezra chapter 7. But you need to know what year it is. So what year was it? Can somebody look it up? Can you all hear me? Testing 1, 2, 3. Somebody look it up. I can look it up myself, but I want one of you all to look it up. Look it up. Look it up, please. Go just do a quick Google search. Somebody do a quick Google search. I'm waiting on you. Somebody do a quick Google search and tell me what year did Artaxerxes make this decree? What year was it? It was obviously BC. So what year BC did he make this decree? Talk to me now. Now, later on, we know that Nehemiah went up to actually accomplish the building himself because the people were hesitant. And that's part of Haggai's prophecy. Haggai was rebuking the people for hesitating to go back up to Jerusalem. They were comfortable in Babylon, but the Most High sent them to rebuke the people. And that's part of what Haggai's prophecy is about. That's right, 457 BC. That's right. Okay, here's some math now. I hope you got a calculator nearby. Here's some math. So you take 2,300, okay? You subtract 457 from 2,300. Tell me what you come up with. You subtract 457 from 2,300. Tell me what you come up with. 1843. There you go. 1843. Okay, very good. Now, there's one thing we have to take account of. We're going from BC to AD. Isn't that correct? So we start in 457 BC and we're going to AD. Now, this is not a mathematical number line because there's no year zero, right? If you're looking at a mathematical number line, you're going to go negative 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You're going to have 0. Then you're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So, but in this situation, there's no 0. There's no year 0. So you start from -1, you go right to +1. So now you're year 1 on the AD side, right? So now you're talking about 1844. So 1844 was the end of the 2,300 days. 1844 was the end of the 2,300 days. Everybody follow me so far? 1844 is the end of the 2,300 days. Okay, wait a minute. So we need to find out, but there was another event. There was 490 years. So let's take a look at that. So you have 490 years. You're going to take 457 from 490. Tell me what you get. You're going to take 457 from 490. What are you going to get? 457 from 490. That's right, 33. Now, you know you got to add 1 to that, right? So now what do you have? AD 34. It was AD 34 that was the end of the 490-year period. AD 34. Let's keep these two dates here. AD 34 and AD 1844. AD 34 and AD 1844, okay? I want you to make sure you have these two dates. This is important, okay? So, because we're talking prophecy now. So you have AD 34 and AD 1844. These are two dates that are important. AD 34 represented the end of the 490 years. AD 1844 represented the end of the 2,300 years where the sanctuary would be cleansed. Okay. All right. Everybody with me so far? I want to make sure I haven't lost anybody. We went through a lot. You'll make no mistake. We went through a lot. Okay. Okay. Very good. I'm glad you're with me. Okay, good. Let's go back now to Daniel with these things in mind. Let's go back to Daniel chapter 9. We have these things in mind now. Let's go back to Daniel chapter 9. Daniel chapter 9. Okay, now let's go back to Daniel 9 and let's look at verse 25, actually from verse 24 down to verse 26. Okay, Daniel 9, 24 to 26. Okay, we're going to examine this very closely because it's a matter of great controversy especially among the Sunday keeping people, but we don't worry about that. We're Israelites. So let's look at Daniel 9 from verse 24 to 26. 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city, to finish the transgression, to make an end of sin, and to make reconciliation for iniquity, and to bring in everlasting righteousness, and to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks, 62 weeks. The streets shall be built again, and the wall, even in troublous times. After 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. The people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood. And unto the end of the war, desolations are determined. Let's stop right here. So we saw last night that the time period spoken of in verse 25 is a 483-year time period. Okay, remember that? The 69 weeks, a 483-year time period. Remember that? So we looked in verse 25 and we went through that 7 weeks and we went through what 60 is, which is 60. And we went through 2 weeks and we came up with 69. So we saw that 483 years would go by and then Messiah would appear. Okay. We just saw that AD 34 was the end of the 490-year separated time, right? So let's take 483 now. 483, okay? Take 483, okay? And subtract from it 457, which is the year the decree was given. 457 from 483. 457 from 483. What do you have? What do you have? 26 AD. That's right. And remember what we have to do? We have to add a year. So now that takes us to what? 27 AD. 27 AD. Right. So now, notice something. I want you to notice something. How many years is there between 27 AD, listen carefully, and the 34 AD, which is the end of the 490-year period? How much is between 27 and 34? How much time is that? How much time? 7, that's right. Which represents a prophetic week, does it not? If I said 7 years, that's a prophetic week, is it not? So now you have 69 weeks, and here you have a 70th week right here. This is the 70th week. There's your 70th week. Now, some very interesting, very powerful, very historically important events take place in that 7th week. So let's take a look at that now. Let's go back to Daniel chapter 9. And let's look at verse 27, Daniel chapter 9, and let's read very carefully with these things in mind, verse 27. Okay, watch what it says. And he, that is Messiah, shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, right? For 1 week, that's the 7 years. In the midst of the week, he shall cause sacrifice and oblation to cease. Let me stop right there. I want to stop. I'm one of the few times. I'm stop in the middle of a verse right here. Notice what it says. The Messiah shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. That's 7 years. In the midst of the week, the Messiah shall cause sacrifice and oblations to cease. So if you have 7 years, that's 1 week. And he says in the middle of the week, first of all, how many years in the middle of a 7? If you divide 7 in half, what do you have? If you divide 7 in half, what do you have? You have 3.5. Ooh, 3.5. So you have 3.5. So after 3.5 years of that last week, Messiah shall cause sacrifice and oblation to cease. For the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate. In other words, there'll be no more killing of animals after 3.5 years. What happened 3.5 years after Messiah began his public ministry? 3.5 years later, what happened? He was crucified. Let me ask you all a question. Did the crucifixion of Messiah cause the ceasing of this? Was that officially the ceasing of the sacrifice of animals for the forgiveness of sins? Yes, it was. So now that this is prophecy, this is what's going on. So now you have 483 years. Messiah was age 30, and he began his public ministry when he got baptized at age 30 by the Apostle John. 3.5 years later, he is crucified in AD 31 in the spring. So AD 27 in the fall, he is baptized at age of 30. AD 31 in the spring, he is crucified, right? 3.5 years later. Everybody with me so far? We still have 3.5 more years, though. We still have 3.5 more years. 3.5 more years still. Well, we got to account for that. Something happened 3.5 years later. Something would have had to happen to mark the AD 34 time period. Something had to happen to mark the end of the 490 years. Is it correct? Something would have had to happen. Well, let's see what exactly happened. Let's turn to the book of Acts. Acts chapter 7. Acts chapter 7. Now, we're not going to read the entire chapter, but I want to read just the beginning of it and the end of it so you guys understand what's happening here. Because we're dealing with the end of the 490-year period, which was separated from the 2,300-year prophecy. So let's see what happened. Acts chapter 7. Acts chapter 7, going to begin at verse, let's see. Actually, I want to start at Acts chapter 6. I want to start at Acts chapter 6, and I want to start at verse 8 of chapter 6, okay? And I'm going to go down to verse 15. Acts chapter 6 from verse 8 to verse 15. Notice what it says. Acts chapter 6 from verse 8 to verse 15. And Stephen, full of faith and power, did great wonders and miracles among the people. Then there arose certain of the synagogue, which is called the synagogue of the Libertines and Cyrenians and Alexandrians, and them of Cilicia and of Asia, disputing with Stephen. And they were not able to resist the wisdom and spirit by which he spake. Then they suborned men, which said, we have heard him speak blasphemous words against Moses and against Yahweh. And they stirred up the people. And the elders and the scribes came upon him and caught him and brought him to the council and set up false witnesses, which said, this man ceaseth not to speak blasphemous words against this holy place and against the law. For we have heard him say that this Yahushua of Nazareth shall destroy this place and shall change the customs which Moses delivered us. And all that sat in the council looked steadfastly on him and saw his face as it had been the face of an angel. So this synagogue, and I want you to notice where this synagogue come from. The Libertines and the Cyrenians and the Alexandrians were all African. See? Notice what it said. Libertines, that's Libya. This is before the Arabs came and took it over. Cyrenians, that's Cyrene. Alexandria, that's Egypt. These were all African synagogues. They arrested Stephen, and they brought false witnesses against him. Hey? Black people are Hebrews, right? They didn't always do what's right, did they? See what happened here? These are the ones that arrested him. And they brought him to the council. And they brought false witnesses against him. But they look on his face and it's like an angel's face. See that? Y'all notice that? Okay. So now we don't actually need to read the beginning of chapter 7. So you know what's going on now. They arrested Stephen. They got him up on charges. They got false witnesses. Now Stephen's going to give them a lesson. He's going to give them a history lesson. And he's going to give them a lesson by the Spirit of the Most High. Okay? That's why the curses come upon us, isn't it? That's why the curse. You see, this end of this 490-year period is the beginning of the curse. The last curse that come upon us. Okay? Notice again. Let's start at chapter 7. Chapter 7. I'm going to begin at verse 51. And go down to verse 60. Okay? Pay attention to what Yahushua does in this narrative. As we're about to read Acts chapter 7 from verse 51 to 60, pay attention to what Yahushua did here. Watch this very closely. Ye stiff-necked and uncircumcised in heart and ears, ye do always resist the Holy Ghost, as your fathers did, so do ye. Which of the prophets have not your fathers persecuted? And they have slain them which showed before of the coming of the just one, of whom ye have now been the betrayers and murderers, who have received the law by the disposition of angels and have not kept it. When they heard these things, they were cut to the heart and gnashed on him with their teeth. But he, being full of the set-apart spirit, looked up steadfastly into heaven and saw the glory of Yahweh, and Yahushua standing at the right hand of Yahweh, and said, Behold, I see the heavens opened, and the Son of Man standing on the right hand of Yahweh. Then they cried out with a loud voice and stopped their ears and ran upon him with one accord and cast him out of the city and stoned him. And the witnesses laid down their clothes at a young man's feet, whose name was Shaul. And they stoned Stephen, calling upon Yahweh and saying, Master, Yahushua, receive my spirit. And he kneeled down and cried with a loud voice, Master, lay not this sin to their charge. And when he had said this, he fell asleep. So he was martyred for the cause of the Most High and the cause of the Messiah. Did you notice? What did Messiah do? He showed himself to the martyr, his servant. But what was he doing when he showed himself to him? What was Messiah doing? What was he doing? Did anybody notice? What was Messiah doing when we read these 10 verses? What was Messiah doing? He was standing, and it's right, he was in the most holy place, and he's standing beside the Father. He's standing beside the Father. Now, I want you to notice something. Keep your finger there. We're going to come right back to Acts chapter 7. I want you to notice Hebrews chapter 1. Hebrews chapter 1. Hebrews chapter 1. Going to begin Hebrews chapter 1. Let's see. Going to read from verse 1 down to verse 3. Hebrews chapter 1 from verse 1 to verse 3. Notice what it says. Hebrews 1 from 1 to 3. Yahweh, who at sundry times in divers manners spake in time past unto the fathers by the prophets, hath in these last days spoken unto us by his Son, whom he hath appointed heir of all things, by whom also he made the world, who, being the brightness of his glory and the express image of his person, and upholding all things by the word of his power, when he had by himself purged our sins, sat down on the right hand of the majesty on high. So when he went to heaven, he did what? He sat down beside the Father. But in this thing we can see here in Acts chapter 7, he's standing up. So what happens here? This is the end of the 490 years. This is the end of a probationary period for the nation of Israel. This is the end of them having their own nation, right? How do we know what will happen next? Luke. Let's look at Luke chapter 21. Luke chapter 21. Luke 21. Going to read from verse 21 down to verse 24. Luke chapter 21, from 21 down to verse 24. Notice what it says. Then let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let them which are in the midst of it depart out, and let not them that are in the countries enter therein. For these be the days of vengeance, and all things which are written may be fulfilled. But woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. For there shall be great distress in the land, and wrath upon this people. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all nations. And Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. So you can see here, after AD 34, this is what Messiah is talking about. He's saying that the people, that there's going to be days of vengeance. There's going to be great distress in the land, right? And this people, that is the Israelite nation, will be led away captive into all nations. They'll fall by the edge of the sword. So you see, so at the end of the 490 years, because they failed and Messiah stood up, that's now judgment time. So now they are going to fall by the sword. They're going to be led captive into all nations. They're going to be annihilated, destroyed. Yes. See, what happened to Daniel was bad, but what happened to the people after Daniel was much worse. You see that now? You see what I'm saying? You guys understand what I'm saying? Everybody sees it. So that is the end of the 490 years. So now from that point forward, and we know that AD 70, AD 66, AD 70, that the city was destroyed. Now the people are going to be scattered. The Gentiles, he says, until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. So now the Gentiles are going to rule the earth. And the nation of Israel is going to be scattered. His people are going to be under the sword. They're going to be led away captive. They're going to be placed in slavery. See, that's what happened at the end of the 490 years. They're going to be placed in slavery. And then after 1844, they would begin to be an awakening. And they would be restored again after 1844. You say, well, wait a minute, man. We in 2018. That's right. We're in 2018. You think that's a long time to the Most High, between 1844 and 2018? You think that's a long time? I tell you, it's not. It's not a long time. It's 174 years. It's 174 years between 1844 and where we are right now. It is a delay. There is a delay. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Let's go back now. Let's go back to Daniel 9 and let's discuss this some more. Let's go back to Daniel 9. I told you we needed this time, right? I told you we needed this time to go through this stuff in detail. Didn't I tell you that? And you can see we do need it, isn't it? You can see that. Let's go back now to Daniel chapter 9 and let's look at verse 27. Daniel chapter 9, verse 27. And he, that is Messiah, shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week, he shall cause sacrifice and oblation to cease. And for the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate even unto the consummation, and that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. So look, we sinned against the Most High. We rejected the Messiah. We rejected his apostles as they were sent after us, after Messiah's resurrection, crucifixion and resurrection. And then we were destroyed and we were annihilated and the city was destroyed and we were sent into slavery over all the world. The Gentiles took over the power of the earth. Well, the Romans had already done it, but now it was official. There would be no nation of Israel in one place. The people would be scattered. They would forget who they were. They would forget their names. In fact, they would be given names of Gentiles. They would be fed with unclean foods. They would be treated as the tail and not the head. They would be disrespected. See, now Deuteronomy 28 comes to pass. You see, now it comes to pass. He says it has to be fulfilled until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. So that means the Gentile power is going to come to an end. We're in Gentile power right now. So we know it's going to come to an end, don't we? It's going to come to an end. So now, 1844, let's talk about that. We discussed the sanctuary service. And when we discussed the sanctuary service, we saw that the high priest goes into the most holy place of the heavenly sanctuary once a year for the forgiveness of his sins and the sins of his people, to cleanse the sanctuary from all the sins that have been stored up in there all year that have been confessed. And those sins are taken out of the sanctuary and placed on the head of the scapegoat. Y'all remember all of that, right? I know it was a lot. I know we did it a couple of weeks ago. You can review it in the Revelation series, but that's what we talked about, okay? So now, Messiah we're told Messiah was going to enter into the most holy place at the end of 2,300 years in 1844. This is prophetic time. Being that it is prophetic time, when he enters into the most holy place, it is the Day of Atonement. How long would he remain in there? How long would he remain in there if he was going in there? Remember, it's called the Day of Atonement, and he was going in there in 1844. How long would he remain in there? How long would he remain before he came out? There's a specific time. It's called the Day of Atonement. How long would he remain in the most holy place? Until he comes out in 1844. How long was he supposed to be in there before he comes out? It's the Day of Atonement. It's prophetic time. He went into the most holy place in 1844. It's not a trick question. Y'all can hear me, right? Testing 1, 2, 3. You can hear me? Testing 1, 2, 3. Everybody, can you guys hear me? Hello, hello, hello. Okay, good. Okay. A day in Bible prophecy is equal to how long? A day in Bible prophecy is equal to how long? How long? How long? No. 1 day is a year. 1 day is a year. Remember Numbers 14:34, Ezekiel 4:6. 1 day is a year in Bible prophecy. Yeah, 1 day is a year in Bible prophecy. 2,300 days is 2,300 years, right? There you go. No problem. No problem. This is what we're learning. This is what we're learning. So now, Messiah entering into the most holy place of the heavenly sanctuary in 1844 tells us he would be completed his work in 1845, right? He'd be done. 1845, he'd come out. And then 4 years later, in 1849, Messiah would return. Because that would be the feast of the Feast of Tabernacles. 5 years later, 5 days after the Day of Atonement, is the Feast of Tabernacles. Does that make sense? Everybody follow me so far? Remember, the Day of Atonement is on the 10th day of the 7th month. And the 15th day of the 7th month is the Feast of Tabernacles. So now if he went in 1844, he would come out in 1845. And 5 years later, 1849, he would be returning to the earth with the Father to get his saints. Well, why didn't he come back? Why didn't he? Think of the year. Where were the Hebrews and what were they doing in 1844? Where were the Hebrews and what were they doing in 1844? Where were the Hebrews and what were they doing in 1844? Where were the Hebrews and what were they doing in 1844? They were still in slavery. That's right. They were still in slavery. So let's turn now to Revelation chapter 6. The sixth seal, which I'm going to show you, is 1844. Revelation chapter 6, the sixth seal, 1844. Something happens, something is shown. So we're going to read from verse 12 of chapter 6, and we're going to go right into chapter 7 and go down to verse 4, okay? So we're going to start at verse 12 of chapter 6 of Revelation and go down to verse 4 of chapter 7, okay? Watch closely now. And I beheld when he had opened the sixth seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood, and the stars of heaven fell to the earth, even as a fig tree casteth her untimely figs when she is shaken of a mighty wind. And the heaven departed as a scroll when it is rolled together. And every mountain and island were moved out of their places. And the kings of the earth, and the great men, and the rich men, and the chief captains, and the mighty men, and every bondman, and every freeman hid themselves in the dens and in the rocks of the mountains, and said to the mountains and rocks, fall on us, and hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand? And after these things, I saw four angels standing on the four corners of the earth, holding the four winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth, nor on the sea, nor on any tree. And I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living Elohim. And he cried with a loud voice to the four angels to whom it was given to hurt the earth and the sea, saying, hurt not the earth, neither the sea nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our Elohim in their foreheads. And I heard the number of them which were sealed, and there were sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel. So now you can understand. The Israelites were scattered throughout the earth, and wrath fell upon them, and they were taken into slavery. They would remain in this state for many centuries. Messiah would enter the most holy place in 1844, and he would delay his return. He would delay coming out because the servants are not sealed, because the Israelites were not even awakened yet. So he would delay his return until they are sealed. Everybody follow me. Does that make sense? So now the delay is where we are right now. That's why it's been 174 years and he hasn't come back yet, because he's waiting. All he's doing right now, the only issue that he's focused on is the seal of his people, Israel. The only issue that he's focused on is the seal of his people. You say, well, how come we represent so many of the jailed people? How come we represented so many of the diseased people? How come we still the tail and not the head if it's representing us, if he's working with us? What do you think? Do you think he wants you going to Washington, D.C. and appealing to the government for your rights? Do you think that's what he's looking for you to do in order to receive the seal? Do you think he wants you to go running to these churches? Do you think that's what he wants you to do in order to receive the seal? No. He's waiting for us to turn to him. If my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and I will forgive their sin and I will heal their land. You see that? So now he's waiting for us to stop looking to Christianity, stop looking to earthly governments, stop looking to earthly politics, and look to the kingdom of heaven. Look to the Hebrew Messiah. Understand who you are and why you're here. Now we know. We failed. We failed several times. The last time we failed was AD 34. Now we understand. And in 1844, the Father made it known in 1844. He's ready to send Messiah back. He's ready now. There's nothing holding him back except the sealing of his true people. So now you understand the whole focus of heaven right now. The whole focus is on awakening us. The whole focus is on our sealing. Okay? So everything that's going on, the Most High is looking for us to stop looking to man, to stop looking to man's institutions, to start looking to his word, to start looking to him as the Messiah is in the Most High heavenly sanctuary, the most holy place. He's waiting for us to look for him. And he's going to have the awakening is taking place. It's already started, as all of you know. It's already taking place. It's already started right now. People are awakening to the truth of who the Israelites are. And you see why it's important that the Israelites know who they are? Somebody say, well, why you focus on color so much? First off, you see, it said in Revelation, there were sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel. He's got to restore his nation first. He's got to restore his people. Their minds have got to be brought back to where they're supposed to be. They got to know who they are. This whole thing is dependent on the awakening of the Israelites. It's dependent. And it's going to happen because the Most High's word is going to come to pass. It's not going to return unto him void, just as he says. So the awakening will happen. The only question is, who's going to be involved in what section of the awakening? Are you going to be against it? Are you going to be for it? Are you going to be one of these people on the sidelines that don't know what's going on with your head up your anus? Or you're going to be with your eyes wide open seeking truth from his word, that his spirit might seal you in righteousness, and that you would give honor and glory to his name? That's the only question right now. That's the only question. So now, brothers and sisters, now we went through Daniel chapter 8, Daniel chapter 2, chapter 7, chapter 8, and chapter 9. Now, we're going to start Revelation now. Okay? So we're going to take a break. I'm going to stop the recording here. We're going to take a break, and we're going to come back